In the heat of Cold War tensions and domestic unrest, a radical group emerged from the American student movement and took a shocking turn toward violence and underground militancy. Known as the Weather Underground or Weathermen, this far-left revolutionary group rejected peaceful protest and embraced armed resistance against what they saw as an imperialist, racist, and oppressive American system. Between 1969 and the mid-1970s, the Weather Underground carried out bombings, jailbreaks, and riots, seeking to ignite a revolution from within the United States. Their story is a dramatic and controversial chapter in Cold War-era America, reflecting how deeply the conflicts of the time, Vietnam, civil rights, and capitalism, fractured the nation. Origins, from SDS to the Weathermen. The Weather Underground originated from the Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, a prominent left-wing student organization founded in the early 1960s. SDS gained national attention for its Port Huron Statement, 1962, and its opposition to racial injustice and the Vietnam War. By the late 1960s, however, SDS was fracturing. One faction, frustrated by the lack of results from peaceful protest, became increasingly radical. Influenced by Marxism, anti-colonial struggles, and the Black Power movement, they believed that violent revolution was necessary. In 1969, this faction formally broke away and formed the Weather Underground Organization, WUO, named after a Bob Dylan lyric, "You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows." Declaration of war, Days of Rage, and going underground. The Weathermen announced their arrival with the Days of Rage in October 1969, a violent protest in Chicago intended to bring the war home. Hundreds of radical activists clashed with police, smashed windows, and attempted to create chaos in the streets. Though poorly attended and widely criticized, it marked the group's shift toward urban guerrilla warfare. In 1970, after an accidental explosion in a New York townhouse killed 3 members who were building bombs, the group went fully underground. They adopted false identities, lived in secrecy, and launched a campaign of symbolic bombings. The bombing campaign, Messages and Violence. From 1970 to 1975, the Weather Underground conducted more than 24 bombings. Though they took pains to avoid casualties, often issuing advance warnings, their targets were highly symbolic. The Pentagon, the U.S. Capitol Building, NYPD headquarters, courthouses, banks, and corporate offices. The bombings were intended as protest and retaliation for the Vietnam War, the invasion of Cambodia, and events like the 1971 Attica prison uprising and the 1970 Kent State shootings. The group also helped engineer the dramatic prison break of Black Panther leader Assata Shakur, highlighting their close ideological ties with Black liberation groups. Ideology and motivation. The Weather Underground saw the United States as a violent, imperialist power that must be overthrown. Inspired by revolutionaries like Che Guevara, Ho Chi Minh, and Mao Zedong, they viewed themselves as part of a global struggle against capitalism, colonialism, and white supremacy. They believed American society was too complacent and complicit in its government's crimes, particularly the war in Vietnam. Through their actions, they hoped to wake up the public and inspire a revolutionary consciousness. Their 1974 manifesto, Prairie Fire, outlined their belief that armed struggle was not only justified but necessary. Criticism and controversy. The Weather Underground was divisive, even on the left. Many in the anti-war and civil rights movement saw them as reckless, self-indulgent radicals whose actions damaged the broader cause. The government responded aggressively. The FBI launched COINTELPRO operations against the group, conducting illegal surveillance, infiltration, and harassment. Several high-profile cases collapsed due to government misconduct, and by the late 1970s, most surviving members had either resurfaced or surrendered. Some, like Bernardine Dorn and Bill Ayers, resurfaced in academic and activist circles, while others served prison sentences for related crimes. Legacy, revolution, regret, and reappraisal. By the early 1980s, the Weather Underground had faded from existence. The revolution never came, and their impact remained hotly debated. To some, they were courageous radicals who dared to challenge an immoral war and systemic racism with real resistance. To others, they were domestic terrorists whose violent tactics only alienated the public and damaged the left. In later years, many members expressed mixed feelings, acknowledging the destructiveness of their methods, while defending their intentions. The post-9/11 era and the rise of new domestic extremism movements have brought renewed attention to the Weather Underground as a cautionary tale. Conclusion: revolution in a time of upheaval. The Weather Underground was a product of its time, an era of war, civil unrest, and radical dreams. As part of the Cold War's domestic front, they represented a small but explosive faction that turned its fury inward, declaring war on the American system from within. While they failed to spark a broader revolution, their story remains a stark reminder of how deeply Cold War tensions fractured the United States. The Weather Underground pushed the limits of protest, and in doing so became one of the most controversial and enigmatic movements in American history.